All right, let's talk about a weird problem to have. What happens when a company gets too successful on Salesforce? I mean, when their data just explodes from thousands of records to literally billions. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and see how Salesforce stops all that success from grinding the whole system to a halt. We're talking about finding a single needle in a digital haystack the size of a mountain.
So think about this for a second. What could you possibly have in common with a massive Fortune 500 company? It's a great question, because the answer really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. It's this shared frustration that connects, a tiny startup with a global corporation.
You got it. It's that slow computer. We've all been there, right? Staring at that spinning wheel, just feeling the frustration build. But now imagine that feeling multiplied by, say, 10,000 employees. Every single second they're waiting, that's a lost sale, a delayed support ticket, a missed opportunity. It's not just annoying, it's a huge, expensive drag on the whole business.
And that really is the core problem, right? Your data is supposed to be your most valuable asset. But there's this tipping point, a point where that asset suddenly feels more like an anchor, threatening to pull the entire ship down.
So what actually happens when your data just keeps growing and growing? It's a question that every single successful company is going to face eventually. Your customer base explodes, you're tracking way more stuff, and all of a sudden that system that used to feel lightning fast starts to, it gives you this. The loading wheel of doom. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's the most obvious sign something's wrong. Reports start timing out, records take forever to open. The whole system just feels like it's wading through mud. So in the Salesforce world, this whole issue has a name. It's called large data volume, or LDV for short. Now, it's not like there's a magic number, but you're generally talking about when you hit tens of millions of records, hundreds of gigs of data, and the sheer volume starts to actively sabotage performance. You don't need a dashboard to tell you you've hit LDV, you can just feel it. And the thing is, this pain isn't just in one spot. Oh no, it spreads everywhere. Suddenly, your system integrations are failing overnight. Your sales team can't even pull up their accounts before a big call. Just trying to update a single contact record feels like it takes forever. It's basically death by 1,000 cuts for your company's productivity. Okay, so why? Why does this happen? To really get it, we need to pop the hood and look at the fundamental architecture that makes Salesforce, Salesforce. The secret sauce, and it's a big one, is a concept called multitenancy. This is the absolute core of the cloud. See, instead of giving every single customer their own private server, Salesforce runs everybody from one massive shared hardware and software stack. And this is the perfect analogy for it. Think of Salesforce as this huge apartment building for data. Everybody in the building shares the same foundation, the same plumbing, the same electricity. But you have your own secure, private unit where you keep your stuff. It's super efficient, but as you can imagine, it also creates some pretty unique challenges. And this is the absolute key. With a traditional database, right, an admin could just throw more hardware at a performance problem. But you can't do that here. In this shared apartment building, you can't just upgrade the plumbing for one apartment without messing things up for everyone else. Your data is separated by software, not by physical walls. And that's exactly why Salesforce had to invent its own set of very specialized tools to handle this stuff. So that brings us to the good part, the solutions. How on earth does Salesforce find that one specific record you need out of billions and do it in like a second? Well, the hero of this story is a little something called the Query Optimizer. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like a GPS for your data. This thing is basically the brains of the whole operation. Think about it. Your GPS looks at traffic, road closures, all that stuff to find you the quickest route. The Query Optimizer does the exact same thing. It analyzes every possible way to get to your data and then picks the absolute fastest path, avoiding all the digital traffic jams to get you what you need, like right now. And it's really smart about how it does it. It basically follows a 4-step plan. First, it's always looking for a shortcut. In the database world, that's called an index. We'll get to that in a sec. If it finds a good shortcut, awesome, it takes it. If not, it gets clever. It picks the smallest, easiest table to start with, then figures out the most efficient way to connect all the other tables it needs. The whole goal is just to minimize the total amount of work the database has to do. It's all about being lazy in the smartest way possible. So what is this index thing? It's the optimizer's #1 tool.
The analogy is perfect. It's just like the index at the back of a textbook. Instead of having to read the entire book to find one topic, you just look it up in the index and go straight to the right page. A database index does the exact same thing. It lets the system jump right to the records it needs without having to scan through millions and millions of rows one by one.
But, and this is a huge but, there's a catch. The optimizer won't always use that index. Think about it. If your query is too broad, like find every single contact in California, the optimizer knows it would have to go back and forth between the index and the pages a million times. At that point, it's actually faster to just ignore the index and read the whole chapter. So it only uses that shortcut if your search is selective enough to make it worthwhile. And those rules are a little different for standard fields versus custom ones.
Okay, but what about the really gnarly cases? The ones where even the super smart query optimizer needs a little help. Well, for those situations, Salesforce breaks out the advanced toolkit.
And one of the coolest tools in that kit is something called a skinny table. This is for your biggest performance nightmares, usually with complex reports. Think of it like a custom-made cheat sheet for the database. Salesforce literally creates a special new table that contains just the fields you need already joined together to make a super slow report run super fast.
This visual explains it perfectly. On the left, you've got the fields you actually want to see in your report. In the middle, that's the messy reality of how Salesforce stores that data behind the scenes, across a bunch of different tables. And then on the right, that's the skinny table. See how clean that is? It's one simple, flat, and most importantly, incredibly fast table that the system can use just for that one report.
Okay, so after all that, what can you actually do about it? Let's get into the practical stuff. Your best practices playbook for dealing with this. First up, reporting. You need to think like the query optimizer. So be super specific with your filters, especially on indexed fields, so it can use those shortcuts. Be lean. Only pull the fields you absolutely have to have. Don't make the database do extra work. Be smart. Maybe pre-calculate some totals on parent records so reports don't have to. And finally, be tidy. Archive old data you don't need. A smaller haystack is always easier to search, right?
Now, for loading and deleting data, the rules are just as critical. If you're moving more than a couple thousand records, you have to use the bulk API. It's built for this stuff. And a pro tip, when you're doing a huge data load, you can tell the system to hold off on recalculating all the sharing rules until the very end. It's a game changer. For massive deletes, use the hard delete option to just skip the recycle bin entirely. Trust me, following these rules is the difference between a smooth data migration and a total weekend-ruining nightmare.
And that brings us right back to the big question. Is your data an asset or is it an anchor? Because managing data at this scale, it's not just a tech problem, it's a business strategy. If you get it right, that data is the most valuable thing you own. But if you don't, it can absolutely become a massive anchor, just weighing down the entire organization.